The last page has been turned in my most recent read. Oh, okay, who am I kidding? Unfortunately, this is a massive lie. Nah, I have currently got 3 books on the go, and I am sort of almost close to finished with 2 of them. The third, also the first one I started, is still stuck where it was last weekend at page 250. Well, whatever, here I am, no spoilers, as opinion-filled as ever and ready to roll, all of which means it's time for the latest episode of Being Bookish. This week, I am, for some reason known only to these fictional characters, off to some small village in the Cotswolds, and no, I am not visiting Agatha in Carsley, where the main character is going to try and solve a murder before she gives birth to her first baby. Yep, you heard that right. I'm joining the Expectant Detectives by Kat Ailes, though I am no way qualified to be part of their group. I'm your host Ray, self-confessed bookworm, introvert, hermit, and long-term depression sufferer. Join me on my journey through my ever-growing to-be-read pile and enjoy the latest of my 100% spoiler-free book reviews. This book is a relatively new addition to the bookcase. I purchased it when I was meant to be exhibiting restraint. So much for that particular game of let's pretend I have a full TBR and really don't need any more books. The Expectant Detectives just happens to be Kat Ailes' debut novel and the first in a new series. The snippet of the second one at the end of my paperback version of this one has me definitely interested in reading Dead Tired. But for now, we're going to be talking all about the Expectant Detectives and nothing more. I know people can say that your hormones can play havoc with your emotions while pregnant, but in this instance, I was more inclined to blame the murder. When Alice and Joe find themselves unexpectedly pregnant with their first child, they decide to be responsible, switching the dangers of London for the safety of countryside living, though the dead body at their local antenatal class has them rethinking their life choice. With everyone in the class considered a suspect, and with little to do until the baby arrives, Alice sets out to solve the mystery and clear her name alongside her new friends. Between the discovery of a shady commune and the unearthing of a mysterious death years earlier, Alice is soon in way over her head. Can she uncover the truth before tragedy strikes again, or her waters break? As pretty much every story does, it starts with a boy and a girl. In this case, Joe and Alice, who are trying to fit in as they have just moved from the big city to a small village that seems to be full of unusual people, or at least that is their original perception. It's further reinforced when Alice goes to meet the local GP and encounters new ager Crispin Oliver. He is the owner of the local herbalists and doesn't seem to be at all trusting of over-the-counter medicines. Suffering the classic heartburn experienced by many pregnant women, she is less than amused when Mr. Oliver takes her Gaviscon and throws it away in favour of a herbal alternative. And believe me, this proves important later on. Unsure whether either of them will fit in, later that same week, Joe and Alice head to a prenatal class hosted by the incomparable Dot. As New Age's Crispin, she introduces the class, which consists of the rather distant Ailsa, pregnant Poppy and her wife Lynn, and Hen and her husband Anthony. There are a few others, but they are completely irrelevant as the story goes on. Before the class really has a chance to kick off, Hen goes into labour, and while the rest of the expectant women watch on, gives birth. As the shocked women and their partners leave the class that never really got started, they discover Mr. Oliver slumped over the shop counter, dead. Questioned by the police, a rather stern Detective Inspector Harris, who, it turns out, is Ailsa's sister, none of the women feel at all confident in her ability to solve the crime that happened when they were all in the same building, and soon Alice is pulled in to play the role of amateur detective, along with new mum Hen, aloof and somewhat antagonistic Ailsa, and Poppy. Of course, no investigation is 100% straightforward, and several times she finds herself confronted with danger, whether it's at the home of elitist Ronald Pilkington or in the commune run by Cameron and Hazel Pan. She also brings her wonderful, if not just a little bit unusual, dog along, who gets into everything, nearly gets poisoned by the original murder weapon, and generally just causes incredible mischief and amusement for her owner, though others are not quite so amused by her antics, especially the ever-so-proper hen. The aim of the game in these novels is to solve the murder before someone else gets hurt. Sadly, poor Right Honourable, though not really, Ronald Pilkington does not get the memo and is the second body found in the small Cotswolds village. So the question remains, will anyone else find themselves in the way of a merciless killer, or will everyone else stay safe? I first heard about this book last year when it came across my selection screen on NetGalley, because mostly of other books I had requested or already reviewed. However, I had so many in my proverbial basket at that time, I figured it would just be adding more than I could realistically handle. I am trying to get better at that. So I passed and just kept the book in mind for a time when I would either borrow it or purchase it. Little did I realise that time wouldn't come for more than a year. However, it has now come and gone, and it was an enjoyable book that I am glad I picked up, even if I now have to wait about a year for the second one, Dead Tired, to be released in paperback so that I can add it to my collection. I'm not a massive fan of cosy mysteries in hardback for some reason. The covers of this book in the UK and the US are strikingly different. To be honest, if I were choosing based on appearances alone, I probably wouldn't have bought it at all. The US cover features characters, but it still has a somewhat odd feel. Meanwhile, the UK cover depicts a murder-themed mobile, complete with various murder-related items as decorations. Not exactly the most intriguing or eye-catching cover options. So, to make a change, it was actually the summary that got me when it came to this book. And I have to thank Andrew Reeds on Instagram for originally bringing it to my attention, or at least reminding me that it existed. Taryn really did not enjoy the book and has some strong opinions on certain inaccuracies she encountered while reading it. She said, "Awful book. I think the author should stick to editing. First off, she made sure that every character was a stereotype. Of the small amount of couples at the childbirth class, which was full of pregnant people, because we know that we can no longer say the word pregnant woman, we had a single activist black woman, a lesbian interracial couple, and a male-female couple that was interracial, one white married couple. Then the childbirth teacher was a completely inept stereotype of a childbirth educator. The birth in the first scene at Lamar's class took no more than a few minutes from first contraction to end, and again everyone was inept except the baby who just popped out. As a retired RN, neonatal and childbirth educator, all I can say is that this is just absurd. Maybe she felt like she was writing a comedy. If so, it was just poorly written trash. I stopped because I could not continue wasting my time on this stereotypical garbage. Sad." Okay, just one word to say on that review. Ouch. The lower rated reviews for this one were actually of a similar ilk to Taryn's, with many of them struggling to reach a certain point in the novel, and a number of them commenting that they were unable to finish it at all. Taryn marked the book as DNF, however, seems to have managed to get a considerable portion of the way through before doing so. As with everything, though, an opinion on art is a personal thing, and these views are as valid as someone else's if they liked it. If you read something and struggle, then it's not worth making it a painful experience you force yourself to go through, unless, of course, it's the health and safety guidelines at your workplace or an instruction manual on the latest piece of flat pack you've just purchased from IKEA. On Goodreads, the overall rating for this book is 3.72, and I have to admit that this seems to be a pattern of late. A considerable number of the books that I've been adding to my shelves have had more middle-of-the-road ratings than really high ones. But that feels like a very accurate reflection of the way that reviews maybe should be. Not everyone is going to like what you do, and when a review score is possibly too high, is that an accurate reflection any more than a book that is consistently receiving 1-star reviews? One day, in the not too distant future, I'm going to be putting together a review strategy for the company where I work, and this is going to be something I end up reflecting on in much more minute detail. The Expectant Detectives was originally released in the UK on the 8th of June 2023, though it was not released in the US until the 9th of January this year, so it will be interesting to see if the score changes at all in the coming months, or if any more reviews are added. Over on Goodreads, which is always my first port of call when it comes to reviews, there are currently 3,058 ratings and 832 reviews for this book. Much lower than I had expected, considering all the people that were talking about it last year, but not everyone's going to leave a review whether they read it or not. Anyway, less speculating. Out of those 3,058 ratings, 62% or 1,921 readers felt it deserved a positive 4 or 5 stars, with the majority choosing 4 stars. At the other end of the scale, 5% or 188 reviewers were less impressed and gave it a 1 or 2 star score. 31%, surprisingly, or 949 readers, were fence sitters, feeling The Expectant Detectives was an average book, deserving only 3 stars. Mary gave the book 4.5 stars and rounded that up to 5 for the purpose of Goodreads and their annoyingly limited score system. She said, "I had no idea what exactly to expect from the debut novel The Expectant Detectives by Kat Ailes, but it ended up being everything I could have hoped for. I love cosy mysteries, and this unlikely, to some extent, group of friends that link up after Alice and her husband move to a small village really went for it with their sleuthing. It was quite humorous, following a group of expectant mothers as they armchair detective their way through a murder, and there are even some other surprises along the way. The story itself is very funny, and I laughed out loud throughout the entire thing. Alice might just make her way into the list of my favourite characters of all time, and I adored silly little Helen the dog. The audio is just as fun as the book, and I loved the narrator, Kitty Kelly, so much. I really hope she continues as the narrator for the series, because I can't think of anyone better for Alice, and just the whole vibe of the book in general. Listening to her was a dream, and I loved every minute of it. I will definitely have to grab a copy of The Expectant Detectives for my shelf, and I thoroughly enjoyed the witty light-heartedness of it all. This was an easy read that kept me guessing, and I think if you are a fan of cosy mysteries that make you laugh, you won't find it hard to love this book." By now, you probably, if you hadn't already realised it, I am a big fan of the cosy mystery and cosy crime genre. It's reached the point where I am actually running out of shelf space for those books. I really need to do a shelf sort soon so that I don't have to stop adding to my collection. But anyway, that is not what today's episode is about. Cozy mysteries as a whole don't attract the same sort of review following as fantasy or romantasy, and I think that this has a lot to do with the readers that these tend to be aimed at. Many who read romantasy and fantasy have been part of fandom for a very long time. They participate in forums, chats on Twitter, X. Not sure I will ever get used to that, despite them changing the domain, and share views on sites like Tumblr. Though it's changing for the most part, the current readers of Cozy Mysteries will be happy enough to share images of the books they're reading on Insta, but they aren't ones to sit down and write extensive reviews. They just want the next book. I'm happy to be proved wrong, but the evidence on sites like Goodreads, Amazon, and Storygraph can't be denied. Cozy mystery readers unite, seriously. Let authors know what you like and make your views known. Just be nice about it. Anyway, now I've told you about other people's views, let's get down to it. Here are my thoughts on The Expectant Detective by Kat Ailes. Completely spoiler-free and 100% honest. Did I like the book? To a degree, yes, I did like the book. I think that the way that the characters were developed and the way that they talked and related to each other was very natural. Because they were in such an unnatural situation, how often are you going to be someone that moves into a new village, okay? Disregard the fact that I'm talking about a cozy mystery and I'm thinking about, at the same time, Agatha Raisin moving into Carsley and immediately being suspected of murdering someone she took to dinner. Let's forget that one. But in real life, you are not going to be in a situation, very often, if you are, I apologise, where you move into a new village, pregnant, and automatically, on joining a antenatal class, discover that somebody is dead and you are now a suspect because your name was on a bottle that said, "Drink me, Alice." Just happens that her name is Alice, and this bottle contained an indigestion medicine instead of Gaviscon. As I said earlier on in the episode, that Gaviscon is going to come back to haunt Alice, not because she's not taken it, but because Crispin had made her an alternative that he was going to gift her, and he didn't get to because he was murdered. So Alice and Joe have a very odd, almost imbalanced relationship. Joe is very close to his mother, Laura, and she wasn't hugely keen on the idea of Alice and Joe moving to this village in the Cotswolds. You don't find out until later it's because she has some emotional connections to this place. And that's another strand of the story altogether. But Alice and Joe, their relationship feels very odd. They're not married, which is irrelevant in any stream of a book. It doesn't matter. They aren't married, but they also don't feel like, it doesn't feel like they communicate very well. Alice is intent on starting a new life, but she's struggling to fit in. And Joe isn't making it any easier. He doesn't seem to want to get to know anybody, really. He's keeping secrets that make it very difficult for Alice to trust him. And after the entire murder thing, after poor Crispin is killed in his shop, their relationship almost feels like it's breaking down. I know that it doesn't, but it feels like because they aren't talking to each other, Joe's keeping secrets, he's going off and not telling her where he's going, and then he's not saying anything. It feels very disjointed. Then, of course, we have Hen and Anthony, who poor Hen is the woman who gives birth in the antenatal class. She's her baby is early and remains unnamed for the entire book, by the way. And her husband, Anthony, it appears, is having an affair with someone. He keeps on being seen with a mystery woman. But nobody wants to tell Hen because obviously she's in a very heightened emotional state, having given birth, having a new baby at home, and not quite feeling herself, understandably. So we have a relationship that doesn't feel like there's any communication. We have a relationship where the man is he's going about his business, but he's also doing some rather dodgy things that people who know Hen are witnessing. And then we have Lynn and Poppy. Lynn and Poppy are a lesbian couple. Lynn is a gardener for the Right Honourable Ronald Pilkington, who just so happens to be the second murder victim. But she is also the estranged niece of Crispin Oliver, the first murder victim. There are so many things going on. It's that I'm trying to think of the way to explain it, but it's always, you have no idea what's going on under the surface. And for some reason, in the small villages that are used in cozy mysteries, there is always some intrigue. Always. You've got in Carsley, you have a murder every single book, and it's always someone who has done something to someone else, and there is something else and there is always a mystery to cover up as well. With this, we have Lynn being the estranged niece of Crispin, an employee of Ronald, and this automatically ties her in the detective's head to the murder, because unfortunately Crispin managed to con Lynn's grandmother into cutting Lynn's mother out of her will, ensuring that Crispin got the entire family fortune, and apparently it wasn't insubstantial. So there's another motive. Every single stone that is unturned, we are discovering motive after motive. And then, of course, we have Cameron and Hazel Pan, who are the owners of a commune in the woods, in Stricker's Woods, that is owned by Ronald Pilkington. And it turns out that Cameron, Ronald, and Crispin founded the commune together. But a woman appeared on the scene called Flora, and she managed to separate these three friends when she went out with all of them and ended up pregnant. And the mystery remained as to who Flora was, because she's mentioned in hushed tones, and Hazel, Cameron's wife, only brings her up when she wants to make sure he's going to do something. And nobody knows who she is. She vanished. However, this underlying mystery is another thing that churns up a lot of ill will. And I'm not going to give anything away because it would be very unfair of me to do so if you're going to read it. All of these characters have means, motive, and, well, not all of them, but a large number of them. And there's also the mystery of poor Jasmine Pan. Who was she? How did she die? Are the deaths connected to Jasmine? And if so, why and how? I loved the fact that there were these three intertwined storylines. The story of Flora, the story of Jasmine, and then the mysterious or not so mysterious deaths of Ronald and Crispin. Because obviously the thing that ties them all together is the commune. But then, is it because of Flora they are being killed? Is it because of Jasmine they are being killed? And when you start to put the little puzzles together, you end up with multiple suspects who are connected to our main characters, Poppy, Hen, Ailsa, and Alice. But then you have to start questioning, why would they do it now? Apart from opportunity. And if that's then the question, who out of the new people in the village, because there are a number, actually has the biggest motive? I actually liked this about this book. I liked the fact that there were multiple mysterious threads that tied all these people together in a massive bow, and it wasn't neat. And you had to start unraveling it and picking apart the pieces to find out who had done it. I have to be honest, I didn't guess until probably 3/4 of the way through the book. And initially I guessed wrong, because I had looked at the wrong part of the bow and pulled that out and gone, oh, right, it must be that person because they got there then. They'd been seen with this person. They'd done that. They'd said this. And I like the fact that I got it wrong. I really do. Where my issues started with the book, I think, were with Alice. I don't know why, but I found her voice quite a grating one. She was she wasn't sanctimonious or I'm from London, I know everything. But there were certain moments where I felt she was quite patronizing or condescending towards Joe. She wasn't at all understanding of the fact that he'd also had to leave his friends and his family and his life behind because of this thing. The pregnancy was an accident, but they were both responsible. And Alice seemed to adjust far easier to the situation because she found people she had something in common with at the antenatal class. She could relate to them and was able to build a friendship and a relationship with them easily because they had this thing in common. Joe is kind of left in the dark. He's still trying to live his life as though he's in the city because that's all he's known. He's moved away from his mum. I mean, Alice obviously also doesn't live near her parents, but both of her parents have moved to Spain, as has her brother. So her family is no longer really part of the equation. And when they do speak, there is a distance between them that's not just physical. Whereas Joe seems to have a very good relationship with his mother, Laura. And Laura also has a very tight bond with Alice. Yet they still moved away from this support network that they had. Alice moved away from her best friend, and we find out a lot about her and her best friend. But poor Joe is left to the wayside, and I really felt quite bad for him because he's moved away because that's what she felt was right. He's moved somewhere that he doesn't know anyone. He is quite uncomfortable. He feels very awkward in the text in general. But maybe that's just my interpretation. So that is the main reason why I struggled with this book. And as much as I am looking forward to the sequel, I'm hoping that we are going to get far more about the rest of the group, because the series isn't called Alice's Investigations, it's called the Mother's Group Investigations. Therefore, it's got to be about the rest of them. It's got to be about Hen and Lynn and Poppy and Ailsa and their relationships and their growth as well. So that's what I'm looking forward to. What surprised me most about the book? I guess the thing that surprised me most was that my favourite character in the book was a dog. Seriously, while the book was good enough to capture my attention and keep it for a while, Helen and her adorable weirdness just made me smile constantly. The book was witty enough, though not nearly what I had expected given what others had said to me, but Helen stayed with me, and I sort of wished that she was just a peculiar human at the centre of everything, because I often just wanted to know what she was thinking far more than I cared about anything coming out of Alice's mouth. I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Alice is something of a self-insert created by Kat Ailes, the author. A belief that is further enforced by the author's profile at the beginning of the book. Sadly, Alice was, as I've already mentioned, probably the weakest and most frustrating character on the page. But as quite often seems to be the case for me, the supporting cast is what made this book a winner, especially our part dog, mainly demon, with a side portion of cow, Helen. If you're looking for something like this, or you loved this and want something else, then maybe you will love these. There are so many on this list. I have a really long and high stack of books I can recommend if you're looking for a cozy mystery, starting with anything Poirot related from the pen of Agatha Christie. Of course, if you're looking for something a little bit different, then I have to go directly to Jessie Sutanto's incredible Vera Wang's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. I cannot promote that book enough. I would also recommend Dead and Scone by Suk Panu, which is the first in his Mrs. Sidhu Investigates series, Tracy Whitwell's Gin Palace, and of course Robert Thorogood's Marlowe Murder Club series. As I've already mentioned, I do have a growing collection of cozy mysteries that I need to reshelve properly. And then I am going to start reading even more of them, including The Windsor Knot and The Murder Game, both of which I've added to my collection in the last couple of weeks. The list is very long, and there are many authors I am looking forward to discovering as I make my way through a very tall pile. But as soon as I find more enjoyable and unique authors, I promise I will share them with you. The last few months have been a little bit tougher when it comes to reading. I have found some absolute gems, or diamonds in the case of Babylonia. No, I will not stop talking about it, but I've also unfortunately found a considerable number of books that feel as though they've sent me into something of a slow read slump. I am doing my best to read myself out of it, but right now it's a bit of a struggle. I am hopeful that at least one of the few books I'm reading at this moment in time will help to snap me out of it. Either that or a good night's sleep will push me into a better and healthier reading pattern. Something's got to work. All of that said, I have managed to add a few incredible books to my collection in the last couple of weeks, including Her Majesty's Royal Coven and the Shadow Cabinet by Juno Dawson, Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books by Kirsten Miller, and Costanza by Rachel Blackmore. Every single one of these speaks to me, and they are on my TBR. But deadlines, people, they exist. Well, that's it for this week, and thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, why not share it with your friends and family, and please post a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other podcatchers where you might listen. Believe me, it really helps. You can also follow me on Instagram as Being Bookish Pod, on TikTok as Being Bookish Reviews. I promise I will get back there some point, and on X as Being_Bookish. And you can find newer episodes and some book-themed videos on YouTube where I am at Being Bookish or Ray's Reading. Or, of course, you can check out my website for some written spoiler-free book reviews at beingbookish.co.uk. Well, I have a few things to get done over the next couple of days and will be back next Monday. This is not a permanent change, but I have a treat for you in the form of an interview with author Katie Moran about her new book, My Lady's Secrets. So keep an eye out for that one. And in the meantime, this is me saying farewell.